Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Simon Fillery. I'm the Head of Inclusion at the Bank of England. And to be truly inclusive, I'd like to say good morning to you all in the room and also to you that are online and watching this and streaming it perhaps in the future. I'm really excited to be here to be able to talk about the work that we're doing at the bank, our inclusion strategy and how it fits into supporting our overall strategy to support the good of the people of the UK by maintaining monetary and financial stability. So for those of you that don't know, we do this through setting the interest rate, controlling the money supply, and probably most importantly for the people of the city, making sure that we regulate our financial services industry. Over the next few years, the UK and the UK financial services have a number of well-documented challenges that need to be met. And the decisions we make in the face of these challenges impact on everybody within the UK. We know that to make the best decisions, we need to have the greatest chance of achieving our mission, we need to make sure we've got the best people around the table. And as the research shows us, to do that, we need to make sure we have a diverse group of people within the bank informing our policies and making sure we have the best possible decisions made. Now, our progress over the last 300 years probably hasn't been the best. It's certainly been slow. But we've certainly seen some upticks around our gender participation over the last century, primarily during the last couple of wars in the 20th century. But it's only in the last 25 years that we've really seen some real changes in the most senior ranks of the bank. It was only in 1993 that we saw the first woman appointed to court. In 1998, we saw our first BAME member appointed to court, Lord Morris. And to this day, we've only had white male governors, although the incumbent governor is Canadian, so perhaps that's a step in the right direction. Beneath these headlines, though, there is a huge amount of effort that's gone into changing the representation of difference within the people that make up the bank. In the last few years, we've seen an accelerated pace of change under the governor's leadership. In 2014, our strategic plan to put diverse and talented as a central pillar of the bank's strategy. The governor has spoken of the reasons why this is important to us. Firstly, it's the right thing to do. We need to look like the people we serve. Secondly, and most importantly, I think, to a central bank, it helps us to build trust. We need to make sure that if we are going to be making decisions on behalf of people, we look like the people we serve. And finally, diversity helps us to reduce groupthink and reduces the chances of monocultures developing in pockets within the organisation. We know that we have to engage with these issues of both demographic and cognitive diversity to support us in achieving our mission. Now, I'm going to see if I can have some better luck with the slides. And I do. There we go. So on the demographic diversity side, we know that gender, ethnicity, nationality, sexual orientation and disability are all examples of demographics or identity characteristics that we're familiar with. We know that participation rates in the workforce can be influenced with targeted interventions. An example of this is the fact that the bank introduced targets for both gender and BAME for our senior management and below senior management. And we are seeing some good progress around this. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Cognitive diversity or diversity of thought is much more elusive to be able to try and measure. But again, the body of research shows how important this can be. What's been interesting to me as a relative newcomer to the bank, a blink of an eye in bank terms, I've only been there for 2 years, is that how pervasive this idea of cognitive diversity is across the organisation. And it was interesting to hear Aaron talk about the fact about diversity of thought being really a male characteristic. That's not something that I've seen actually within the conversations within the bank, because our output is really around decision making, and actually having that diversity of thoughts is really seen as very, very important. It is with these influences in mind that we developed and launched our inclusion strategy, bringing together much of the work that's already been done to create a framework to ensure we could achieve everything we aspire to do. And this is really a brief summary around what we want to try and achieve within the inclusion strategy. We've set our ambition to continue to build an inclusive culture at the bank where everyone can be their whole selves and produce their best work. Interestingly, I think compared to some other organisations, what we've done is we've brought together 3 different pillars. Our first is the traditional diversity piece we were talking about before, about all those different pieces of identity and the difference that people bring into the organisation. Our second is around well-being and thinking about how we can try and make sure we can support our colleagues in their physical, mental and social well-being so that, again, they can make sure they can produce their best work. And finally, bringing in our community agenda, where actually we're going out and we're doing a huge amount of great stuff within our community. But now what we're doing is trying to bring that together so it has a real purpose in trying to support the overall bank mission. We use 5 success measures to try and measure how we, being the bank, we have to measure everything, but we have our 5 success measures on the right-hand side here, left-hand side even, where we are talking about how we're going to be able to make sure that we can actually achieve that and make sure we can continue to report on the progress that we're trying to make. I'm not going to be able to talk about all of this. I'm conscious that Simon's going to be holding the clock against me, so I'm going to be focusing on a couple of issues that I think I've been asked to talk about in a little bit more detail. So starting really talking about the diversity and transparency, I think that's probably one of the key areas that I'm most proud of. In June 2013, we had no female governors, just one female executive director. Today, we have 1 out of 5 deputy governors and 3 out of 16 executive directors. It doesn't sound like much, but actually that's big progress for us. And actually, I think there's a huge amount that we're going to be able to achieve in the future. Within our senior management cohort, you can see here some of the progress that we've made around our targets. Female representation has gone from 21% to 30% within our senior management cohort. We're on track to hit our target of 35% representation by 2020, en route to what we really want to achieve, which is going to be gender parity at some point, I would say, within the next 10 years after that date. This is despite some really high-profile leavers that we've had over the course of the last year. I'm sure some of you may have read in the press about some of the challenges that we've had around senior leaders leaving. But it demonstrates the real strength of the internal talent pipeline and goes to the fact that we've been making a huge amount of effort to make sure that we have a good breadth of women within the organisation who can succeed into the roles that we have. We've seen our BAME representation increase from 3 to 6% over the same period of time, and we've really set ourselves a very challenging target to make sure that we can double that again by 2022. Below senior management, we're on track to achieve 50-50 gender split and a 20% representation by 2020. Now, to accelerate this change, we are using transparency to really make sure that we can engage our business. We've opened up our HR system to create dashboards for each business area, and they include all the demographic data, recruitment, hiring, promotion rates, and we've overlaid that with our employee opinion survey data to really give our businesses a feel about what's going on within their respective areas and where there's potential issues. And then we've challenged them to be able to come up with a plan about what are you going to do to try and actually make sure you can make that difference, to try and fill that diversity deficit that Simon was talking about earlier. We then publish this data. We publish this data internally so we can create a circle of reporting, planning and action. And this has helped us really to be able to try and engage that really tricky middle management group that sometimes struggles to understand why diversity is important to the organisation and what their role is in order to be able to try and help to address it. In line with our commitments as a signatory of the Women in Finance Charter, we've published the aggregated data within our annual report, and we've taken that one step further by doing the same for BAME. So this is a good example here around, this is the data that we're publishing within our annual report. We go into more detail around this, and we know we've got more to do, because at the moment we're focusing very much on gender and BAME. What we want to do, and our aspiration, is to make sure that we can go to include a lot more around the other protected characteristics. But we've got very small pools at the moment, but that's absolutely part of our commitment. So for me, this is, I think, one of my biggest bugbears as an HR professional, is actually the data sometimes can be a barrier to having the conversation around actually how you try and drive change. And what we need to make sure we do is... No, Simon's only say 1 more minute. Good Lord. Okay, quick wrap up. So this is a real barrier to change around trying to make sure we can drive positive conversations, but having that honest conversation really has helped us to be able to try and move the dial. Now, I should finish now, I think, because I think Simon's holding up the timing for me, so I'm going to skip over the last part that I was going to talk about with diversity of thought. Just very quickly, though, we have been doing a huge amount of work around social mobility and looking at trying to see how we can try and engage with and measure social mobility within the organisation. More to come around that, but we were acknowledged this year as a top 50 employer for social mobility by the Social Mobility Commission. We are also about to just kick off some really interesting work to try and define what we mean by diversity of thought. I have no idea where this is going to go, because actually it's something that's very, very different to anything else that I've done before, but it's fascinating. I think trying to work out how do you try and work out what we think about diversity of thought actually means, and then thinking about how that can have implications for some of the decisions that we make on behalf of ourselves and on behalf of the people of the UK. So thank you very much.
You don't have a presentation, though.